I should have known when Melissa ordered champagne for a Wednesday lasagna night. My name is Alex Grady, and I'm about to tell you how my wife destroyed my life over dinner, and how I returned the favor with interest. But let's start with the champagne, because that's where the universe began its slow-motion collapse into a Stephen King fever dream. "Alex, honey, could you grab the good glasses?" Melissa called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that sing-song quality she used when she was planning something. I was in my office, debugging code for a client who thought urgent meant I procrastinated for 3 months, and now it's your problem. The smell of her famous lasagna, the one that had won over half the neighborhood, drifted through the house like a promise of normalcy. Tom Avery, my best friend since we were 12 and stealing baseball cards from Murphy's corner store, was already at the dining table with our daughter Ellie. Tom looked nervous, which should have been my second clue. He kept checking his phone and running his hands through his hair like he was about to give a presentation to the board of directors, instead of eating dinner with the people who'd seen him throw up in my backyard after too many beers last 4th of July. "Dad, why is Mom being weird?" Ellie whispered as I passed her chair. At 14, my daughter had developed a finely tuned radar for adult bullshit that would have made a CIA operative proud. "Your mom's not being weird. She's being—" I paused, watching Melissa arrange napkins with the precision of a neurosurgeon. Festive. The girls were there too, Melissa's holy trinity of enablers. Rachel, the blonde real estate agent who treated gossip like currency and had never met a secret she couldn't weaponize. Priya, perpetually attached to her phone, documenting every moment of her life like she was building evidence for her own sainthood. And Gina, the quiet one who smiled too much and always seemed to know more than she let on. "This is so exciting," Rachel squealed, bouncing in her chair like a caffeinated cheerleader. "I can't wait to hear the big news." Big news. My stomach clenched with the kind of dread you feel when your doctor calls and says, "We need to talk." I'd been married to Melissa for 16 years. I knew her tells, the way she touched her neck when she was lying, the way she arranged things obsessively when she was nervous, the way she gathered an audience when she wanted maximum impact. Tom caught my eye across the table and quickly looked away. Strike 3. "Okay, everyone." Melissa emerged from the kitchen carrying a bottle of Dom Perignon that cost more than my monthly car payment. She'd changed into the red dress she wore to special occasions, the one that made her look like she belonged in a magazine instead of suburban Ohio. "I have something wonderful to share with all of you. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." She stood at the head of the table, glass raised, looking like she was about to announce her candidacy for president. The overhead light caught the highlights in her auburn hair, and for a moment, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her all those years ago. Before the late nights at work, before the mysterious phone calls she took in the garage, before I'd started feeling like a stranger in my own life. "Melissa," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake building in my chest. "What's this about?" She smiled at me with the kind of radiance that could power a small city. "Alex, you've been such a good husband, such a good friend to Tom. And Ellie, sweetheart, you're about to get some very exciting news about our family." The room went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Mr. Collins mowing his lawn next door. Even Priya had stopped filming. "I'm engaged," Melissa announced, her voice clear and bright as a church bell. "To Tom." The words hit the room like a grenade with the pin pulled. Rachel's mouth fell open. Priya's phone clattered to the table. Gina went pale. Ellie made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. I felt time slow down, the way they say it does in car accidents. Everything became hyper-real, the smell of cooling lasagna, the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the way Tom's face had gone the color of old newspaper. My wife of 16 years, had just announced her engagement to my best friend of 26 years, and I was sitting there like an idiot, with a forkful of salad halfway to my mouth. "We've been seeing each other for months," Melissa continued, as if she was discussing the weather. "We didn't want to hurt anyone, but we couldn't deny our feelings any longer. Love finds a way, doesn't it?" I set down my fork very carefully. In my peripheral vision, I could see Ellie's face crumpling, tears starting to track down her cheeks. Tom looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. The girls were staring at me, waiting for my reaction, probably already composing their social media posts about the drama they'd witnessed. But I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't demand explanations or threaten violence. Instead, I pulled out my phone and, under the table where no one could see, opened the photos I'd been collecting for the past 3 months. You see, I'd known something was wrong. The late nights, the new lingerie, the way she'd started going to the gym at odd hours. It doesn't take a detective to recognize the signs, so I'd done what any reasonable husband would do. I'd hired a private investigator. What I'd discovered was that Tom wasn't Melissa's only extracurricular activity. He wasn't even in the top 3. I selected a particularly damning photo, Melissa in bed with Derek from her yoga class, timestamp from 2 days ago, and airdropped it to Tom's phone. Tom's phone buzzed. He glanced at it casually, then went rigid. His face cycled through confusion, recognition, and pure rage in about 3 seconds. "You lying bitch," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Melissa's smile faltered. "Tom? What? Months?" Tom stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. "You said you'd ended it with everyone else. You said I was the only one." The room erupted. Rachel started shrieking questions. Priya fumbled for her phone, trying to capture the meltdown. Gina sat frozen, watching the chaos unfold like it was a particularly intense episode of reality TV. Ellie ran from the room, sobbing. "Tom, please, let me explain." Melissa reached for him, but he jerked away like she was radioactive. "Explain? Explain how you're fucking half the neighborhood while planning our engagement party?" Tom's voice cracked on the last word. He looked at me with something that might have been apology or might have been fear. "Alex, I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. I didn't know—" "Didn't know what?" I asked mildly, taking a sip of champagne. It was excellent. Crisp, with notes of betrayal and a finish of impending social apocalypse. "That my wife is a collector?" Tom stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. The girls followed in a flurry of whispered conversations and sideways glances. Melissa stood alone at the head of the table, still holding her champagne glass, looking like Cinderella after midnight. "Alex," she said, her voice small and broken. "Please, let me explain." I stood up, straightened my napkin, and headed for my office. "The lasagna was excellent," I said over my shoulder. "You should get the recipe from whoever you learned it from. I know it wasn't your mother." I locked the office door behind me and listened to her pound on it for 20 minutes, alternating between apologies and accusations, between tears and threats. When she finally went quiet, I opened the filing cabinet and pulled out a folder labeled Insurance. Inside were photographs, bank statements, hotel receipts, and a detailed timeline of Melissa's activities over the past 6 months. 17 different men, including my best friend, her boss, her personal trainer, and the barista from the coffee shop where she claimed to be working late. I'd been planning to use this evidence in divorce proceedings, thinking I could end things quietly and maintain some dignity. But after tonight's performance, after the public humiliation in front of our daughter and half the neighborhood gossip network, dignity was off the table. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to my lawyer. Then I stopped, deleted it, and opened a new document instead. If Melissa wanted to play games in public, I'd give her a game she'd never forget. After all, I was an IT project manager. I specialized in systematic problem-solving, detailed planning, and flawless execution. And I'd just been handed the most important project of my life. the complete and total destruction of the people who'd destroyed mine. I cracked my knuckles and got to work. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word travels fast in Millfield Heights, especially when it involves champagne, public humiliation, and the kind of drama that makes people feel better about their own boring lives. Melissa was gone. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and her side of the closet looked like it had been hit by a tornado of designer clothes and desperation. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Alex, I'm staying at Rachel's. We need to talk. I love you. M." I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. Then I made coffee, scrambled eggs for Ellie, and tried to pretend my world hadn't imploded over Italian food and French champagne. "Dad?" Ellie appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, her eyes red and puffy. "Is Mom really with Uncle Tom?" Uncle Tom. She'd been calling him that since she was 5 years old. He'd taught her to ride a bike, helped her with math homework, been at every birthday party and Christmas morning. The betrayal cut deeper than Melissa's affairs. Those I could understand even if I couldn't forgive them. But Tom? Tom was supposed to be family. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said, which was true. After last night's revelation, I wasn't sure Tom would still be in the picture. But whatever happens between the adults, you're my priority, always. She nodded and picked at her eggs. "Kids at school are going to find out, aren't they?" Probably. There was no point lying to her. In a town of 12,000 people, secrets had the lifespan of mayflies. "But we'll handle it together." My phone buzzed. A text from my boss, Jenna. "Heard about last night, you okay? Also, the Morrison project needs those updates by noon." Even personal apocalypses couldn't stop the relentless march of corporate deadlines. I texted back, "Fine, updates incoming." But I wasn't fine, and by the time I got to work, it was obvious that everyone knew it. Conversations stopped when I walked into the break room. People stared at their computers a little too intently when I passed their desks. The receptionist, normally chatty, gave me a pitying smile that made me want to punch something. "Grady," Jenna called from her office. "A word." Jenna Martinez was 45, divorced, and had the kind of no-bullshit attitude that made her equally respected and feared. She'd hired me 3 years ago and had never once asked about my personal life, which I appreciated. Until now. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "You look like hell." "Thanks. Really boosts the confidence." Cut the sarcasm. "I heard about the dinner party disaster. Rachel Hendricks called my wife at 6 this morning, practically hyperventilating with gossip." Jenna leaned back in her chair. "Want to tell me your side?" I gave her the abbreviated version. Wife cheating, best friend involved, public humiliation, nuclear fallout. Jenna listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. "Jesus," she said when I finished. "That's some Jerry Springer shit right there." "Pretty much." "You going to be able to work? Because I can't have you falling apart on me during crunch time." "I'll be fine," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. "Good, because half the office is probably going to treat you like a leper for the next few weeks, and the other half is going to want all the gory details. Neither of those things is productive." She leaned forward. "My advice? Keep your head down, do your job, and let the lawyers handle the rest." Sound advice. Too bad I wasn't planning to take it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of awkward encounters and whispered conversations. By lunch, I'd heard 3 different versions of the story, each more dramatic than the last. In one version, Tom and I had gotten into a fist fight. In another, Melissa had thrown her engagement ring at me. The truth, that I'd sat quietly and let them destroy themselves, was apparently too boring for the rumor mill. I was debugging code and trying to ignore the stares when my phone rang. Tom's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. Alex, man, I'm so sorry. I fucked up, okay? I fucked up bad. But you have to understand. She told me you guys were separated, that you were seeing other people. I never would have. Look, can we meet? Can we talk about this? Please? I deleted the message and went back to work. At 3 o'clock, Melissa called. I answered on the fourth ring. Alex, thank God. We need to talk. I'm at work. Then I'll come there. No. The last thing I needed was Melissa making a scene in my office. What do you want? I want to explain. I want to fix this. Fix it? I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to me. Melissa, you announced your engagement to my best friend over dinner, in front of our daughter. What exactly do you think needs fixing? It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I was going to tell you privately, but Rachel kept pushing, and Tom thought we should just— Tom thought? I interrupted. So this was his idea? A pause. We both thought it would be better to be honest, to not sneak around anymore. How considerate. I'm sure Ellie appreciated the honesty. Don't. Her voice turned sharp. Don't use our daughter against me. I'm not using her against you. You did that yourself when you decided to blow up her family for the entertainment of your book club. It's not like that, and you know it. Alex, I fell in love. It happens. People grow apart. They find new connections. With 17 different people? Silence. Long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. What did you say? You heard me. Alex, I don't know what you think you know, but I know about Derek from yoga. I know about your boss. I know about the bartender from O'Malley's and the guy from the gym and the contractor who fixed our bathroom last spring. I kept my voice level, professional, like I was reading from a project report. I know about the hotel receipts and the credit card charges and the fact that you've been running a one-woman sexual wellness program for half the county. Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller. How long have you known? 3 months? And you didn't say anything? I was going to. I was planning to handle this quietly, through lawyers like civilized people. But then you decided to make it a dinner theater production. Alex, please, can we meet? Can we talk about this face to face? I looked around the office at my co-workers pretending not to listen, at the life I'd built that was now the subject of coffee break speculation. No, Melissa, we're done talking. I hung up and turned off my phone. The rest of the afternoon crawled by. I finished the Morrison project updates, responded to emails, and tried to pretend I didn't notice the way conversations stopped when I walked by. At 5 o'clock, I packed up my things and headed home, dreading what I might find there. What I found was Tom's truck in my driveway and Tom himself sitting on my front steps, looking like he'd aged 10 years since last night. Alex, he said, standing up as I got out of my car. Thank you for coming home. I wasn't sure you would. It's my house. Right. Of course. He ran his hands through his hair, that nervous gesture I'd seen 1,000 times over the years. Look, can we talk, please? I need to explain. Explain what? That you've been fucking my wife? He flinched like I'd slapped him. It wasn't supposed to happen. We were just talking, you know? She was unhappy, and I was going through the divorce with Janet, and we were both just lonely. So, you decided to solve your loneliness by destroying my marriage. No, God, no. Alex, you have to believe me. I never meant for this to happen. It developed over time. And she told me you guys were having problems, that you were practically separated already. Did she tell you about the other guys? Tom's face went blank. What other guys? I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd collected. Tom's face went through the same cycle of emotions I'd seen at dinner. Confusion, recognition, rage. That lying bitch, he whispered. Yeah, well, you're welcome to her. Just don't expect me to be your best man. Alex, I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. If I had known... You would have what? Not slept with my wife? Tom, You've been in my house every week for the past year. You've eaten at my table, played with my daughter, looked me in the eye, and called me your best friend while you were screwing my wife behind my back. What exactly would you have done differently?" He didn't have an answer for that. We stood there in my driveway, two men who'd been friends for more than half our lives, with 26 years of history crumbling between us like a house built on sand. "I should go," Tom said finally. "Yeah, you should." He got in his truck and drove away. I watched his taillights disappear around the corner, then went inside to check on Ellie. She was in her room, doing homework and pretending she hadn't been crying. I knocked on her doorframe. "How was school?" "Weird. Jenny Morrison asked me if it was true that Mom was getting married to Uncle Tom. I told her to mind her own business." "Good girl." "Dad? Are you going to be okay?" I looked at my daughter, my smart, strong, beautiful daughter, who deserved better than to be collateral damage in her mother's midlife crisis. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm going to be fine." And I was going to be fine. But Melissa and Tom, they had no idea what was coming. I went to my office, opened my laptop, and got back to work. Not the kind of work Jenna paid me for, the kind of work that required patience, planning, and a complete understanding of your target's weaknesses. Phase 1 had been gathering intelligence. Phase 2 was about to begin. I waited in the shadows until Tom and Melissa emerged from the restaurant, laughing the sort of laugh lovers laugh when they want an audience to believe them. They paused by the BMW, kissed as if the world were theirs, then climbed in. I stayed until the taillights winked out and the valet rolled their eyes. Then I went home with a clean conscience and a tired grin. Sunday morning, the neighborhood filled with a peculiar perfume. It started as a whisper in the stairwell outside my building. Someone muttered about shrimp and rotten seafood. And by 9, it was trending in 3 private group chats and one very unhappy WhatsApp chain I had deliberately joined months ago. Tom posted a photo of his car with the caption, "Mechanic says issue with exhaust. Anyone know a good garage?" accompanied by a string of anguished emojis. Melissa replied with a supportive heart and a cringe face. Powell forwarded it to his golf buddies with the subject line, "Can you believe this?" And someone else added a laughing sticker. Tom was frantic, which is almost a joy to watch when the stakes are ego and image rather than life and limb. He called his broker, his sister, 2 different mechanics, and the country club concierge, all of whom offered varying degrees of sympathy and outrage. He tried to laugh it off when he saw my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, standing on her porch. She simply raised an accusing eyebrow and watered her begonias. Embarrassment, like sunlight through frost, made him small. At noon, Tom posted another photo, the backstabber carved into the door, captioned, "Found this morning. Who does this?" It was staged indignation. The carriage return after the caption was theatrical. Within an hour, half the town had seen it. Comments ranged from "OMG" to "Hope you get justice" to one cruel soul who suggested he deserved it. The post had traction. My phone warmed in my pocket with silent satisfaction. But social media is a double-edged scalpel. By evening, a copy of the parking lot surveillance from Chez Laurent, timed, grainy footage of a shadowy figure lingering near his car, had been forwarded to Tom's cousin, who was, inconveniently for me, a cop. The cousin texted, "You okay? This looks like it could be vandalism. File a report." Tom called me. He sounded hollowed out. "Did you see the footage?" he asked. "No," I lied. "What footage?" Tom was suspicious in the way husbands become when they're several steps ahead and 3 steps behind. Suspicion looks for patterns, and I had given it a catalog. He asked if anyone had seen him arguing with me, if I had a motive, who I had been with that weekend. I offered bland reassurances about neighborhood watch and mischief and bad apples. He thanked me and hung up. I watched the progress dots on my screen crawl and then vanish. The police came Monday. A uniformed man with tired eyes and a notepad took statements, circled the dent in the door with a skinny red pen, and asked all the formal questions. Who knew about the dispute? Did anything else happen recently? Had Tom received threats? I watched from my living room window as Tom answered, his face a map of exhaustion. The officer's parting words, "We'll run the footage and see if we can get prints," were both ominous and absurd. Prints on the open road rarely reveal anything but the passing of a hand. Word arrived at work that afternoon. Powell's suspension had been made public, and the country club divorce notices were still circulating like molding bread. Melissa posted a short message. "I never meant to hurt anyone. Privacy, please." The message was short, sorrowful, and expertly calibrated for sympathy. She was a woman who knew how to craft her image even when the edges of it were frayed. I should have felt triumphant. I did, at first. There was a small, bright thrill every time my phone blinked with a new notification about Tom's woes. It felt for a while like power, like finally balancing a ledger. But there was also something else, quieter and colder, that moved like a shadow under my ribs. I caught myself watching Tom's posts, not with glee, but with the clinical interest of someone observing the fallout of a controlled experiment, and that perspective made the edges of my satisfaction less sharp. That night, while the town simmered in gossip, I took a long walk. The air smelled faintly of salt and something rotten. The shrimp prank had lingered, pesticides of revenge. A couple pushed a stroller and avoided eye contact with me. Mrs. Patterson watered her plants and told a neighbor, too loudly, that some people have no shame. The tenor of the street had shifted. It felt less like a community and more like a jury. I told myself it was justified. Tom had been reckless with trust. Melissa had been careless with boundaries. Powell had been predatory. But revenge, no matter how neatly executed, grows teeth. It bites. The car smell was only the first thing to make that bite visible. The real test, I suspected, would be what happened when the law, the public, and Tom's pride all started to claw back. On Tuesday morning, an email landed in my inbox from an address I did not recognize. No subject line, just a single line of text and an attached photo. The photo was of the back of my own car, taken at dusk, the license plate blurred but the shape unmistakable. The text below read, "We see you." My throat tightened. For the first time in weeks, the thrill of the chase turned into the shiver of being hunted. I stared at the photo until the pixels blurred, and something that had been distant and precise and clean in my mind, not unlike an algorithm I had tuned at work, suddenly seemed messy and dangerous and human. I had planned carefully, covered tracks where I thought it mattered, and told myself that what I had done was proportional. But plans rarely predict people. People escalate. People react. And now, whatever had started as a schematic for humiliation had the potential to become a live wire, with consequences I had not fully imagined. I set my phone down and waited for the next notification, the next text, the next sign that I had stepped too close to a line I couldn't uncross. Outside, a dog barked. Inside, the kettle began to sing. The town went on discussing, judging, forgiving, condemning. I, meanwhile, had to decide whether to keep playing the chess game I had started, or to fold the board and reckon with what my victory might cost. I opened the certified letter with a calmness that surprised me, like ripping a bandage off slowly instead of yanking it. Melissa's attorney had been thorough, too thorough. The letter listed dates, times, screenshots, and a narrative that painted me as erratic, obsessive, and dangerous. There was a demand for supervised visitation, a request for an emergency hearing, a suggestion that I submit to a psychological evaluation. They wanted me quiet, contained, and off the internet. They wanted Ellie with Melissa, full stop. My first instinct was to laugh. My second was to rip the letter into pieces and flush them. I did neither. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, read it 3 times, and then took a pen and underlined the words that mattered: custody, emergency, evidence. "Dad?" Ellie's voice cut through the kitchen like sunlight across coffee. She had her tablet open to the latest comments under my video, people debating whether I was brave or cruel, allies and haters duking it out under the hashtag. Teenagers were merciless and merciful in equal measure. "I need you to promise me something," she said, putting the tablet down. "If this goes to court, don't do anything stupid." "You mean like filling Tom's exhaust with shrimp?" I said, half a joke. Ellie didn't smile. "Like anything that makes you look unstable. Melissa is trying to scare you into being a non-parent, Dad. Don't hand her that win." Her practical voice did what no number of angry posts could. It anchored me. I folded the envelope and put it on top of the insurance folder anyway, because I needed options, not theatrics. Options meant lawyer consultations. I called one that afternoon, an older woman recommended by a colleague for reasons passing between whispered respect and mutual relief. Her office smelled of leather and lemon polish. She listened without interrupting, making small notes and asking the right questions: dates, witnesses, texts, photos. When I told her about the sprinkler fiasco and the exhaust prank, she stopped writing and looked up with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "You understand," she said, "that the court will not view your actions favorably. Even if you feel justified, what you did could be framed as harassment. Melissa has a strong position if she focuses the story on the best interests of the child. Courts take that very seriously." "I know," I said, "but she put herself into my life. She's rewritten the rules. She announced an engagement over lasagna at my table. She lied to my face. There's a pattern." "Patterns matter," she said, "but you need to prove it without doing anything that looks like intimidation. We build a case. We show evidence of her relationship with Powell, the affair, the context, and importantly, we document your stability. Pay stubs, school involvement, counseling if you must. We prepare for the psychological evaluation on your terms, not theirs." When I left her office, the insurance folder felt different in my hand. It used to contain car policies and warranties. Now it held possibilities: bank statements, soccer registration receipts, a stack of emails I'd saved from my work inbox to show a steady routine. Revenge was fine, she implied, as long as it didn't become a legal liability. I liked the sound of that. Measured, deliberate, defensible. I started by cleaning up the obvious. I unlisted my social profiles, removed posts that were juvenile or reckless, and set privacy settings to friends only. I deleted the video from my phone. Uploaded copies remained in the cloud, yes, but I wanted the record to show restraint, not spite. It felt dishonest and strategic at once. I was both performing and protecting. Then I shifted strategy. If Melissa wanted to make this about my behavior, I would make it about hers. I pulled the photos I'd taken of her with Powell, made careful copies, and organized them chronologically. I collected messages, work texts that hinted at impropriety, car service receipts that placed her at Powell's office at odd hours. I assembled a timeline that showed not just a single reckless fling, but a pattern of risk and poor judgment. Proof, I told myself, was cleaner than rumor. But paper only goes so far. Courts and the public both respond to narrative, so I contacted a small local reporter I had once met at a PTA meeting. He owed me a favor, and casually asked if he'd be interested in a story about workplace misconduct at the country club. I was careful not to lie. I simply suggested that there were unanswered questions. He took the bait: a polite email, a recorded conversation, and a background check later, and the club's leadership began to shuffle in ways that made headlines. Quiet announcements, a PR statement about internal reviews, an emphasis on protecting minors and staff. That afternoon, over reheated pasta and a mug of tea that had gone cold, Ellie asked, "Is this going to get worse, Dad?" "It might," I admitted, "but there's a difference between escalation and escalation with a plan." "What's the plan?" she asked. I hesitated. It would have been honest to say I was improvising, flying by instinct, letting anger sketch the map and hope finishing the lines. But that sounded sloppy. Instead, I said, "We show the truth. We protect what's ours. We let the facts do the rest." Her face, 12 going on 20, looked solemn. "Promise me you'll be the calm one," she said. "Promise me you won't be the story." I promised. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the lamp on, the insurance folder open like a small altar of evidence. I typed carefully, emails to the reporter, a letter to HR at Melissa's company outlining the photos I had, no accusations, only questions, and a detailed log of my interactions since the dinner. I printed copies for the lawyer, for my file, and, reluctantly, for myself. Revenge had been a medicine. It numbed the hurt and sharpened the edges of my life. But now, with court on the horizon and a custody petition in Melissa's hand, the medicine tasted bitter. What had been a straight shot of satisfying retribution had turned into a cocktail that required careful dosing. Outside, the night hummed with ordinary sounds, the distant rumble of traffic, the neighbor's late-night television, the muffled laughter of someone walking a dog. My phone buzzed once, twice, a notification from the reporter, a cryptic text from an unknown number that read only, "We know what you did." In the moment before I opened the reporter's email, I felt the old thrill tingle at the base of my skull. Then the reality of Ellie's face from that afternoon, the look that mixed fear and trust, pulled me back. This was no longer about Tom or Powell or Melissa alone. It was about my daughter and the life we had built together. It was about whether I could balance the appetite for vindication with the responsibility of being a father. I opened the email. The reporter wanted to meet at noon the next day, off the record, with a list of questions. The unknown number texted again, "You'll need to be careful. People don't like messy windows." I closed my laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, thinking of windows, of the way we present ourselves to the world, the view we allow others to see. The pieces on my kitchen table were arranged like chess, but the board had more players than I'd realized. I could feel the game shifting, not just under my hand, but under everyone's. The next move, I knew, would require patience, law, and a quiet ruthlessness I hadn't yet fully tested. When I turned on the lamp again, the insurance folder felt heavier, as though the paper itself now knew what it implied. Outside, a car passed slowly, its headlights slicing across the curtains. I could have let it go. I could have folded the papers back into the drawer and gone back to pancakes and soccer practices. Instead, I began to draft my response, measured, precise, and, this time, entirely legal. Melissa's lawyer stood up again, trying to regain control of the narrative. "Your Honor, this video has been edited. My client insists the defendant provoked the altercation before the recording began. We can't confirm its authenticity." I raised my hand slightly. "The restaurant provided the footage directly, Your Honor. Metadata and timestamp are intact. If the plaintiff's attorney doubts authenticity, we can subpoena the original security hard drive." Judge Morrison looked from me to the screen, then back to Melissa. "Do you dispute that this is your fiancé, Ms. Avery?" Melissa's throat worked, but she didn't answer. The silence stretched until the judge finally said, "Very well. Proceed, Mr. Grady." I switched slides in my PowerPoint. This is the online timeline of events surrounding that night, the same night Melissa claims I attacked her fiancé. You'll notice that, within 20 minutes of the incident, 3 videos from unrelated bystanders appeared on social media, corroborating my version of events. I've included the public URLs and account handles. I paused and gestured to the screen. Each video shows me being attacked and retreating without physical retaliation. Not exactly the behavior of a violent man. The judge nodded slightly, making another note. Melissa's lawyer whispered something to her, and Melissa shook her head quickly, eyes wide and furious. It wasn't just fear, it was recognition. For the first time she realized she'd lost control of the story. I moved on. Now, regarding the claim that my behavior endangers our daughter. You'll find in Exhibit D attendance records from Ellie's school, signed by her teachers, showing that I have been responsible for every morning drop-off and nearly every pickup since February. You'll also see correspondence from her school counselor, stating Ellie is thriving academically and emotionally in my care. Judge Morrison flipped through the packet I'd prepared. I see that the counselor describes the home environment as stable and supportive. Did your wife attend these meetings? No, Your Honor. She was unavailable. Melissa's lawyer interjected, My client was traveling for work. 18 weeks out of the past 32, I said. I've attached her flight itineraries and hotel invoices from her corporate expense reports. The employer's system is public for staff review. Each trip corresponds conveniently with a new name on my list of extramarital associates. The judge frowned. Mr. Grady, I understand your frustration, but keep your remarks factual. Yes, Your Honor. I clicked to the next slide. My point is simple. The plaintiff's claim that I am an unfit parent is contradicted by every measurable standard: school attendance, medical visits, community involvement, employment stability. Meanwhile, her own record demonstrates chronic absence, misconduct at work, and personal entanglements that could compromise Ellie's well-being. Melissa slammed her hand on the table. You're twisting everything. You've been spying on me for months, collecting information, hacking, humiliating me publicly. Judge Morrison raised a hand. Ms. Avery, you'll have your turn. Melissa's voice cracked. He ruined my life. He made that video go viral. My boss was suspended because of him. Our friends won't even speak to us. I kept my tone even. That may be true, Your Honor, but I would argue that the truth ruins lives only when those lives are built on lies. For the first time, Judge Morrison's lips twitched in something close to amusement. The bailiff coughed to hide a laugh. Even Melissa's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, probably realizing that theatrics were only digging the hole deeper. After an hour of questioning and counter-arguments, the judge finally closed the file. I've seen enough for today. I'll review all evidence and issue a temporary custody order pending final evaluation. Her tone softened slightly. Mr. Grady, I will say this. Your presentation was thorough, perhaps overly so. You clearly have organizational skills. However, revenge, even when cleverly packaged as documentation, is a dangerous motive. I hope you understand the difference. Yes, Your Honor, I said quietly. Then she turned to Melissa. Ms. Avery, your conduct outside this courtroom is concerning. Regardless of marital issues, a parent must demonstrate judgment and honesty. Based on the evidence presented, I find insufficient grounds to remove custody from Mr. Grady at this time. The court will maintain joint custody under temporary supervision, with review in 6 weeks. Both parents are to undergo family counseling before the next hearing. Melissa looked like someone had unplugged her from a power source. Her lawyer started whispering furiously again, but the judge was already standing. Court is adjourned, Morrison said. Mr. Grady, Ms. Avery, do not contact each other outside legal channels. And for everyone's sake, stay off social media. The gavel came down like a punctuation mark on the end of a long, bitter sentence. I gathered my folders, every sheet still perfectly aligned, and turned toward the exit. Melissa didn't move. Her eyes were glassy, a mix of fury and humiliation. Tom sat in the back row, pale as chalk, his arm in a sling, a reminder of how thoroughly his own meltdown had backfired. As I passed, he muttered, You think you've won. I stopped just long enough to meet his eyes. No, Tom. I just stopped losing. Outside, the air felt cooler than it should have. Sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps, sharp and sterile. Ellie was waiting with my sister, who had taken the day off to be there. When she saw me, she ran forward and hugged me tightly, as if she'd been holding her breath all week. Did we win? She asked. I hesitated. We didn't lose, I said. That's a start. She smiled, small but real. Mom's going to be so mad. Yeah, I said. Probably. As we walked to the car, I thought about what Judge Morrison had said, about revenge, about motives. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had crossed lines that blurred justice with obsession. But standing there in the sunlight, my daughter's hand in mine, I didn't feel like a villain. I felt like someone who had finally forced the truth to stand on its own 2 feet. And in a town like Millfield Heights, that was victory enough, for now. When Judge Morrison re-entered the courtroom, the air shifted, like a classroom when the teacher returns to find students pretending they hadn't just been throwing paper balls. Melissa and her lawyer straightened immediately, eyes red but defiant. I stood too, adjusting my tie out of habit more than nerves. I'd made my peace with whatever came next. At least that's what I told myself. The judge settled behind the bench and took a slow breath. Before I give my ruling, she said, I'd like to address both of you as parents, not litigants. This courtroom has seen its share of pettiness, but rarely such thoroughness. She looked directly at me when she said the word, and I couldn't tell whether it was reprimand or reluctant admiration. Mr. Grady, your evidence is extensive. Ms. Avery, your behavior, if even half of what's presented is true, raises serious questions about your priorities as a parent. Melissa's chin trembled, her tears still flowing but now mixed with genuine panic. Your Honor, I've made mistakes, but I love my daughter. I just don't trust Alex not to keep escalating. He's obsessed with punishing me. I wanted to object, to argue that obsession required affection, and I had none left to give her. But Judge Morrison raised her hand. I've reviewed the videos, the social media posts, and the witness statements, she said. While I don't condone some of Mr. Grady's actions, I see no evidence of violence, substance abuse, or neglect. In contrast, Ms. Avery, the pattern of dishonesty and recklessness demonstrated in these materials is concerning. Melissa's lawyer began to speak, but the judge cut her off. No, counsel, you've had your turn. Both parties have. There was a silence heavy enough to bend time. Even the clerk had stopped typing. Therefore, the judge continued, temporary custody will remain shared for now, but I am ordering mandatory counseling for both parents. Ms. Avery, your visitation will be supervised for 30 days while a custody evaluator completes her report. Mr. Grady, you are to refrain from further online activity regarding this case, or any member of your family. That includes indirect references, pseudonyms, or anonymous postings. I'm sure you understand the consequences if you ignore that. I nodded, though her gaze lingered long enough to make it clear she suspected I'd test that boundary. Court was adjourned. Melissa slumped into her chair like a deflated parade balloon while her lawyer whispered furiously. Tom wasn't there, probably hiding from the humiliation of the video still circulating online. But the damage had already seeped into their relationship, like oil into soil. I gathered my folders slowly, savoring the quiet power of preparation, of having been ready for every move they'd tried to make. Outside the courtroom, Melissa's lawyer intercepted me again. You enjoy this, she said, voice low and sharp. Humiliating her. You think this is justice, but it's cruelty dressed in logic. I met her gaze. No, I said. Cruelty is announcing your engagement to your ex-husband's best friend while your daughter's still chewing her dinner. The lawyer didn't reply. She just exhaled through her nose and walked away. I stepped into the hallway, sunlight streaming through tall courthouse windows. Melissa followed a few paces behind, clutching her purse like it contained the last pieces of her dignity. Alex, she called softly. Wait. I turned, mostly because curiosity still had its claws in me. Her eyes were swollen, her mascara smudged into faint gray crescents. Can we not do this anymore, please? The videos, the posts, the lawyers, it's tearing everything apart. For Ellie's sake, can we stop? There was something almost genuine in her voice this time. Almost. For a second I imagined saying yes. I imagined putting it all down, the evidence, the resentment, the late night scouring metadata, and walking away. But forgiveness is a muscle, and mine had atrophied beyond repair. You said that after the first lie, I reminded her, and the second, and the fifth. You don't want peace, Melissa. You want relief from consequences. She flinched, and I saw it. The flash of guilt she could never quite hide. She'd always been good at controlling the narrative, but the truth had a way of bleeding through even her best performances. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I believed she meant it. I also believed it didn't matter anymore. "Then start by staying away from my daughter's school events until the counselor clears it," I said. "If you really want peace, prove it with silence." Her lips parted, then closed again. She turned and walked toward the exit without another word. I watched her go, feeling that strange mixture of triumph and loss that always follows the end of a long war. Because that's what it was now, a war with no real victory left to claim. When I reached the parking lot, my car felt too quiet. The hum of the courthouse HVAC faded behind me, replaced by the low chatter of other families leaving, other lives unraveling in adjacent courtrooms. I sat for a while, staring at the steering wheel, letting the weight of everything settle. Ellie texted me. "You okay?" "Yeah," I typed back. "It's over." But even as I wrote it, I knew it wasn't true. These things never really end, they just change shape. By the time I got home, the video had passed 300,000 views. My inbox was full, messages from strangers calling me a hero, others calling me a monster. Brands wanted interviews. Some local podcast about digital revenge had even invited me to speak. I deleted them all. Ellie was on the couch, laptop open, headphones in. She smiled when she saw me. "So? We keep things the same for now," I said. "Counseling, schedules, the usual." She nodded, looking relieved. "You did good, Dad." I smiled back, but my mind was already elsewhere, on the inevitable ripple effect of today's hearing, on Tom's anger, on Melissa's next move. Because if there was one thing I'd learned from the whole ordeal, it was this: endings are illusions. There's always another act waiting backstage, rehearsing its lines, ready to step into the light when you least expect it. And I had a feeling this play wasn't done with us yet. Judge Morrison returned and called us back into the courtroom. "After reviewing the evidence," she began, "I find that while both parties have engaged in behavior that is less than ideal, there is no evidence that Mr. Grady poses a danger to his daughter. The alleged harassment appears to be a response to significant provocation, and his actions, while perhaps ill-advised, fall well short of the kind of instability that would warrant a change in custody." She looked directly at Melissa. "Mrs. Grady, your concerns about your husband's behavior might carry more weight if your own behavior had been more appropriate. Announcing an engagement to your husband's best friend during a family dinner shows a remarkable lack of judgment and consideration for your daughter's emotional well-being. Therefore," Judge Morrison concluded, "I'm denying the petition for emergency custody change. The existing custody arrangement will remain in place pending formal divorce proceedings." Melissa's lawyer started to object, but the judge cut her off. "However, I am ordering both parties to refrain from any further harassment, property damage, or social media campaigns related to this matter. Mr. Grady, your point has been made. Mrs. Grady, your choices have consequences. I suggest you both focus on what's best for your daughter instead of what's worst for each other." We filed out of the courtroom in silence. In the parking lot, Melissa caught up with me. "Alex, please. Can we call a truce? For Ellie's sake?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She looked tired, older, like the weight of her choices was finally catching up with her. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered that she was still living with Tom, still planning their future together, still expecting me to just accept the destruction of my family with grace and dignity. "A truce?" I said. "Melissa, you burned down our life for entertainment. You humiliated our daughter, destroyed a 26-year friendship, and tried to paint me as a dangerous lunatic when I responded with some harmless pranks. And now you want a truce? I want us to stop hurting each other. Then you should have thought of that before you started hurting me." I got in my car and drove home, where Ellie was waiting with pizza and a bottle of sparkling cider. "How did it go?" she asked. "I won." "Good," she raised her glass. "To Dad, the most stable, crazy person I know." We clinked glasses and ate pizza, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe things were going to be okay. But the feeling didn't last long, because that night I got a text from an unknown number. "You think you're so smart. You have no idea what's coming." I showed the text to Ellie, who rolled her eyes. "Mom's being dramatic again." "Maybe," I said. But something about the message bothered me. It didn't sound like Melissa. It sounded like Tom. And Tom, unlike Melissa, had never been much good at thinking things through. I went to my office and opened my laptop. If Tom wanted to escalate this beyond pranks and public embarrassment, I'd show him what real escalation looked like. After all, I still had those photos of Melissa with her boss, and her personal trainer, and the barista from the coffee shop. It would be a shame to let all that evidence go to waste. Tom made his move on a Tuesday morning at 9:47 a.m. during the quarterly sales presentation at his insurance office. He was 3 slides into his pitch about customer retention strategies when every screen in the conference room suddenly switched to a slideshow of text messages between him and Melissa. Intimate text messages, graphic text messages. The kind of messages that made his boss, Mr. Henderson, choke on his coffee, and his co-workers suddenly find their shoes very interesting. "What the hell?" Tom lunged for his laptop, but the presentation was being controlled remotely. The messages kept cycling through, each one more embarrassing than the last, including several that discussed his performance issues and Melissa's suggestions for improvement. The final slide was a photo of Tom and Melissa in bed with the caption, "When you betray your best friend, but can't satisfy his wife either. Performance issues, small-town drama, check karma." Tom's boss suspended him on the spot. The video of his meltdown, recorded by a helpful coworker, was online within an hour. I was debugging code and trying not to laugh when Jenna appeared at my desk. "Please tell me you didn't hack into someone's work presentation," she said. "I would never hack into anything," I replied. Though I might have helped Tom troubleshoot some technical difficulties with his slideshow software, he asked me to look at his laptop last month when he was having connectivity issues. "Jesus, Grady, you're like a digital ninja with a grudge." "I prefer solutions-oriented problem solver." She shook her head and walked away, but I caught her trying not to smile. The response was swift and predictable. By lunch, Tom was calling me every 10 minutes, alternating between threats and apologies. Melissa left 17 voicemails, each one more hysterical than the last. The neighborhood Facebook group was in full meltdown mode, with people taking sides and sharing increasingly creative theories about what would happen next. But I wasn't done. Not even close. That afternoon, while Melissa was picking up Ellie from school, I paid a visit to her car in the school parking lot. I'd learned a lot about creative revenge from my online research, and I was particularly inspired by a prank involving glitter bombs and stink bombs that some college students had used on their cheating roommate. I rigged Melissa's air conditioning system with a device of my own creation, a small container filled with biodegradable glitter and a scent that could charitably be described as eau de garbage disposal. When she turned on the AC, the device would rupture, filling her car with sparkles and the kind of smell that would make a skunk reconsider its life choices. The timing was perfect. Melissa got in her car, started the engine, and immediately turned on the air conditioning because it was 90 degrees and humid enough to grow mushrooms. The device triggered, and suddenly her pristine white BMW looked like a unicorn had exploded inside it, while simultaneously shitting itself. Melissa burst out of the car like it was on fire, covered head to toe in pink and gold glitter, gagging from the smell. The entire school pickup line watched in fascination as she stumbled around the parking lot, trying to brush glitter off her designer dress while retching. Ellie, who had witnessed the whole thing, calmly got in my car. "Dad," she said, trying not to laugh, "you're terrible." "Your mom wanted sparkle in her life," I replied. "I just helped her achieve her goals." The video, recorded by approximately 15 different parents, was trending on TikTok within hours. Glitterbombed became the hashtag of the day, and Melissa became an unwilling internet celebrity. The comments were brutal. "When your karma comes with craft supplies, this is what happens when you mess with the wrong IT guy. I can smell this video. Plot twist, the dad is actually a supervillain and we're all here for it." That evening, Melissa showed up at my door. She was still finding glitter in her hair, and she smelled like she'd been marinating in a dumpster. "Alex, this has to stop," she said. "You've made your point." "Have I? Because it seems like you're still living with Tom, still planning your future together, still expecting me to just accept what you did to our family. What do you want from me? You want me to grovel? You want me to beg for forgiveness? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You destroyed our marriage, humiliated our daughter, and betrayed my trust in the most public way possible. Did you think I was just going to quietly disappear? I thought you were a better person than this." I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to me. "Maybe I was, but you killed that person over dinner last month. This is who you created." She started crying again, but this time it felt different, less performative, more genuine. "Alex, I'm scared. Tom is talking about getting back at you, about escalating this. I'm afraid someone's going to get hurt." "Then maybe you should choose better boyfriends." "I'm serious. He's been drinking, talking about revenge, about showing you what real humiliation feels like. He's not thinking clearly." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, but all I saw was exhaustion and genuine fear. "What exactly is he planning?" "I don't know. He won't tell me. But he's been asking questions about your work schedule, about Ellie's activities." "Alex, I think he might be planning to hurt you." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of tires squealing in my driveway. Tom's truck pulled up, and Tom himself got out, swaying slightly. He'd definitely been drinking, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Melissa!" he shouted. "Get away from him. Get in the truck." "Tom, you're drunk," she called back. "Go home." "I'm not leaving without you." He started walking toward us, and I could see something in his hand. A crowbar. "Ellie," I said quietly, "go inside and call 911. She disappeared into the house. Melissa stepped between Tom and me. "Tom, please put that down." "He humiliated me." Tom's voice was slurred but full of rage. "He destroyed my career, my reputation, everything, and you're still talking to him like he's the victim." "Because he is the victim," Melissa shouted back. "We betrayed him, Tom. We destroyed his life first." "Bullshit. He's a psychopath. Look what he's done to us." Tom raised the crowbar, and for a moment, I thought he was actually going to swing it at me. Instead, he brought it down on Melissa's car, shattering the windshield. "That's what I think of your fucking glitter bomb," he screamed. He raised the crowbar again, and this time, I was pretty sure he was aiming for my head. I grabbed the garden hose and turned it on full blast, hitting him square in the face. He stumbled backward, slipped on the wet concrete, and went down hard, the crowbar clattering across the driveway. By the time the police arrived, Tom was sitting on my front steps with his head in his hands, crying. The crowbar was in evidence. My security cameras had recorded everything, and half the neighborhood had come out to watch the show. They arrested Tom for public intoxication, destruction of property, and menacing with a weapon. As they put him in the back of the patrol car, he looked at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he said. Yes, I replied, it is. But I was wrong, because the next morning I woke up to find my own car vandalized, my mailbox destroyed, and a brick thrown through my living room window. There was a note tied to the brick. You want to play games? Let's play games. I called the police, filed a report, and installed more security cameras. Then I sat down at my computer and began planning the final phase of my campaign. Tom wanted to play games. I'd give him a game he'd never forget. After all, I still had one card left to play. The biggest, most public, most devastating card in my deck. It was time for the neighborhood block party. The annual Millfield Heights block party was scheduled for Saturday, June 15th, from noon to 8 p.m. Every year, the entire neighborhood gathered in Riverside Park for food, games, gossip, and the kind of community bonding that made suburban life bearable. This year, thanks to the ongoing drama involving me, Melissa, and Tom, attendance was expected to be record-breaking. Everyone wanted front-row seats for the final act of our domestic apocalypse. I spent the week preparing like a general planning the invasion of Normandy. I had evidence folders, backup drives, printed photos, and a presentation that would make my corporate clients weep with professional envy. But most importantly, I had a plan that would end this war once and for all, in front of everyone who mattered. Saturday morning dawned clear and hot, with the kind of oppressive humidity that made the air feel like soup. Perfect weather for a public reckoning. I arrived at the park early with Ellie, who had appointed herself my official photographer and social media manager. She'd been documenting the entire saga on TikTok, and her videos had gained a following of people who were invested in the outcome of what she called the Great Suburban Revenge War. "Dad," she said as we set up our picnic table, "are you sure about this? I mean, Mom's still my mom, even if she's been acting crazy." "I know, sweetheart. And after today, hopefully, all the crazy will be over and we can get back to being a family. Just a different kind of family." The park filled up quickly. By noon, it looked like half the town was there, along with people from neighboring communities who had heard about our drama through social media. The local news station had even sent a reporter, though I wasn't sure if they were covering the block party or the ongoing soap opera. Melissa arrived at 1 o'clock with the girls, Rachel, Priya, and Gina. She looked nervous, constantly checking her phone and scanning the crowd. Tom was nowhere to be seen, which was probably for the best, considering he was out on bail and had a restraining order that required him to stay away from me and my family. At 2 o'clock, I made my move. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, standing on the small stage that had been set up for the day's activities. "Can I have your attention, please?" The crowd turned toward me with the kind of eager anticipation usually reserved for championship sporting events or public executions. Phones came out, cameras started recording, and the noise level dropped to a whisper. "Many of you know that my family has been going through some changes lately," I began, my voice carrying clearly across the park thanks to the sound system I'd personally tested that morning. My wife announced her engagement to my best friend over dinner last month, which came as quite a surprise to me and our daughter. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Melissa had gone pale and was trying to push through the crowd toward the stage, but Rachel and Priya were blocking her path, their phones out, recording everything. Since then, there's been a lot of speculation about what really happened, who was at fault, and whether my response has been appropriate. So I thought it would be good to set the record straight, with evidence, in front of everyone who's been following this story. I connected my laptop to the sound system's display screen, which was visible from anywhere in the park. "This is a timeline of my wife's activities over the past 6 months," I said as the first slide appeared. "As you can see, her relationship with Tom was just one of many relationships she was maintaining simultaneously. The screen filled with photos, timestamps, and locations. Melissa with her boss, Melissa with her personal trainer, Melissa with the barista from the coffee shop, the contractor who'd fixed our bathroom, and a dozen other men I'd documented over months of investigation. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "Holy shit!" A woman near the front started crying. Melissa finally broke free from the crowd and ran toward the stage. "Alex, stop!" she screamed. "Please, don't do this." "Why not?" I asked, my voice still calm and reasonable. "You didn't have any problem making our private life public when it suited your purposes." The next slide showed bank statements, hotel receipts, and credit card charges. "This is what betrayal looks like in financial terms," I explained. 17 different affairs, funded by our joint accounts, while I was working overtime to pay for what I thought were legitimate business expenses and girls' nights out. Tom's truck roared into the park, tires squealing as he drove across the grass toward the stage. He jumped out, clearly drunk again, and started pushing through the crowd. "You son of a bitch!" he screamed. "Turn that off! Turn it off right now!" "Tom!" I called out cheerfully. "So glad you could make it! I have some special slides just for you." The screen switched to text messages between Tom and Melissa, including the ones where they discussed their plans to break the news to me gently, and the ones where they laughed about how clueless I was. Tom reached the stage and tried to climb up, but several neighbors grabbed him and held him back. He was screaming incoherently, swinging at anyone who came near him. "Let me show you my personal favorite," I said, advancing to the next slide. It was a photo of Tom and Melissa in bed, but with a twist. There was a third person in the photo. Gina, the quiet one from the girls, who was apparently not as quiet as everyone thought. The crowd exploded. Gina, who had been standing with Rachel and Priya, turned and ran toward the parking lot. Rachel started screaming at Melissa. Priya kept filming everything, her face a mask of shock and delight. "Plot twist," I announced. "It turns out Tom was cheating on my wife while he was cheating with my wife. And the other woman was one of her best friends. It's like a Russian nesting doll of betrayal." Melissa collapsed to her knees in the grass, sobbing. Tom broke free from the people holding him and charged the stage again, but this time I was ready for him. I pulled out a pair of handcuffs, the novelty ones Ellie had gotten me as a gag gift for Father's Day, and as Tom climbed onto the stage, I grabbed his wrist and cuffed him to the microphone stand. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "I present to you Thomas Avery, my former best friend, current backstabber, and future registered sex offender." "What?" Tom stopped struggling and stared at me in confusion. "Oh, didn't I mention? One of your conquests was 17 when you started your relationship with her. Janine Morrison from the coffee shop. She turned 18 last month, but your relationship started in February. I have photos, timestamps, and her testimony." I smiled at him. "The police are very interested in talking to you about that." Tom's face went white. In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. "You're lying," he whispered. "Am I?" "Janine, would you like to come up here and tell everyone about your relationship with Tom?" A young woman emerged from the crowd. She looked nervous but determined. "He told me he was divorced," she said, her voice shaking. "He said his ex-wife was crazy and that he was looking for someone younger, someone who understood him." The sirens got louder. Tom started struggling against the handcuffs, panic replacing rage on his face. "You set me up!" he screamed. "This whole thing was a setup." "Actually," I said, "you set yourself up. I just documented it." The police arrived and immediately took control of the situation. They arrested Tom for violation of his restraining order, public intoxication, and after a brief conversation with Janine and a review of my evidence, statutory rape. As they led him away, Tom looked back at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," I replied, "it really is." The crowd began to disperse, but slowly, like people leaving a particularly good movie who wanted to discuss the ending. Melissa was still on her knees in the grass, surrounded by the wreckage of her social life. Rachel and Priya had abandoned her, along with most of her other friends. She looked small and broken and utterly alone. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Alex," she said, as I walked past her toward the parking lot. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know," I said. "But sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't give Ellie her family back. Sorry doesn't undo the humiliation or the betrayal or the lies. What happens now?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time as her husband. "Now you figure out how to live with the consequences of your choices, just like I had to figure out how to live with mine." "And us? Is there any chance?" "There is no us, Melissa. There hasn't been for a long time. I just didn't know it until you announced your engagement over lasagna." I walked away, leaving her there in the grass, surrounded by the ruins of the life she'd chosen to destroy. Ellie was waiting by our car, her phone in her hand, a huge grin on her face. "Dad," she said, "that was epic. My TikTok followers are going crazy. You're trending on 3 different platforms." "Great," I said. "Can we go home now? I'm exhausted." "Can we get ice cream first? I think we should celebrate." I looked back at the park, where people were still standing around in small groups, discussing what they'd just witnessed. The local news reporter was interviewing witnesses. Someone had already set up a GoFundMe for my legal expenses, even though I didn't need one. In the distance, thunder rumbled and dark clouds were building on the horizon. A storm was coming, but for the first time in months, I wasn't worried about it. "Yeah," I told my daughter, "let's get ice cream. We've earned it." As we drove away, the first drops of rain began to fall, washing away the last traces of the life I used to have. And for the first time since that terrible dinner party, I felt like I could breathe again. Tom was going to prison. Melissa was going to have to rebuild her entire life from scratch. And me? I was going to raise my daughter, do my job, and maybe, eventually, figure out how to trust people again. But first, ice cream. Because sometimes, after you've burned down your enemy's world in front of half the town, you need to celebrate with chocolate chip cookie dough and your teenage daughter's social media commentary. "Next time," I told Ellie as we pulled into the Dairy Queen parking lot, "I'm just ordering takeout." She laughed, and the sound was better than any revenge I could have planned. The war was over. I had won. And tomorrow I would figure out what came next. But today? Today was for ice cream and the satisfaction of a job well done. After all, some victories are worth savoring. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.